remind you that from the top right of your screen, you can switch to speaker view. And of course, the session is being recorded. I hand over for a brief introduction to everybody here present to Keith Demicoli.
Thank you so much, Timothy. So I'm Keith Demicoli. I'm the new head of communications and business development at the Malta Chamber of Commerce, Enterprise and Industry. I'd like to welcome all of you, Honorable Minister, HSBC Malta CEO, Chamber of Commerce President and former President, and all participants, distinguished guests. I'd like to thank specifically and formally from the outset all the people who worked behind this project, more specifically Glenn Bugeja and Matthew Swain from HSBC, Timothy Aldwin, and our former President, Perit David Chwirep, is with us this morning as well. So it's great that all the key people who worked really relentlessly to make this project happen, they're all here this morning. So why we're here this morning? A brief context from my good self, because as you might be well aware, last year, the Malta Chamber of Commerce, Enterprise and Industry launched its economic vision for 2020-2025. Its main overarching aim was towards achieving smart economic growth and securing sustainable economic development. How we can do that? The Malta Chamber of Commerce prepared and delivered 59 tangible recommendations. And I can say this morning that we're possibly contributing towards that strategy, towards that ambitious goal, launching a project to help Malta's building and construction industries become more sustainable, or as the buzzword goes, more greener. So establishing Malta's framework for a net zero carbon building to create a framework in Malta inspired by LEAD. LEAD stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. I will not dwell on that, but both Timothy and engineer Abigail Spiteri will surely give us more insights on what's the project all about. I'd like to invite Timothy Aldwin straight away. He's been working on this project specifically since last August. So Tim possibly can take us through why we're here this morning and why this framework really matters.
Thank you very much, Keith. This all started in August of last year when HSBC came to the Malta Chamber, inviting us to come up with a project on sustainability. We all put our heads together, and one of the first things we did was invite engineer Abigail Kutaya to speak with us to help us develop this idea. Why? Because she's the only LEED certified professional in Malta. Over weeks, which turned into months, with the help of Matthew Swain and Professor Maria Attard, working with HSBC Malta Foundation and HSBC Group, we identified that the building and construction sector was the part of Malta which needed our attention most, in line with our economic vision, as you rightly pointed out, where we strive for increased quality and where we specifically mention, actually, the need to push in the direction of LEED. So in the end, we came up with this project, which we're very proud to say has been recently awarded its funding. And I will hand over to my colleague, engineer Abigail Kutaya, to take us through the technical aspects of the project. Over to you, Abigail.
Thank you, Timothy, and thanks, Keith, and good morning to everyone. I will be sharing a brief presentation in order to present what has been already discussed both with HSBC and the Malta Chamber of Commerce. If I may, this project is not being done obviously on my own, but there's also Professor Ruben Borg, as well as engineer Damien Gutt, who have been on board from the very beginning. So let me share a bit. So basically, as rightfully stated, this project is in line with working towards a sustainable building and construction industry. And together with the Chamber, we are proposing to establish Malta's framework for a net zero carbon building in line with the decarbonization goals and the climate neutrality goals, which were set as of recent by the government itself. In order to give you an overview, some people might say, but why are we moving in this direction? So basically, the emerging practice in Malta for smart buildings has been, so to say, very, very recent, and the need for such is because of the same goals which I was speaking about before, and directives which have been proposed, and eventually the directives would be imposed on Malta as well. As you can see over here, there is the Maltese Parliament building, which as of to date is one of the most sustainable buildings in Malta. For instance, an example would be that the type of materials which are used is recyclable material from Gozo. Also, the facade is designed in such a way that there would be natural shading. There's also the introduction of renewable energy sources, ground source water, which is being pumped into the system, so on and so forth. So this building is actually naturally classified as a sustainable building. What is sustainability about? Sustainability normally is linked to only one aspect sometimes, but actually it is based on the three pillars, which is the environmental, the economic, and also the health and well-being, which as a result results obviously in human sustainability. The importance of the well-being of the occupants in the buildings is ever so important, and that's why we are emphasizing the need to have sustainable buildings on the way also to net zero carbon buildings. If we have to look at some of the statistics, we can see obviously why we are focusing in the building and construction industry. Basically, in order to give a bit of some statistics, buildings are responsible for approximately 40% on average in the EU of the total energy consumption. They constitute approximately 36% of the overall CO2 emissions in the EU. Up to 90% of a person's life is spent indoors, and we can say this more than ever today. 65% of the EU building stock was built before the 1980s, so it's important to highlight that we cannot only focus on new builds, but also on retrofitting of existing buildings. And 97% of the EU's building must be upgraded to achieve the 2050 decarbonization goals. And this gives you a bit of an overview of why it is so important and detrimental to act now. Good. So in line with the EU strategy and obligations, I thought of listing down without putting too much information as to why we are also embarking on the philosophy of adopting the European Green Deal. So basically, as part of the European Green Deal and the directives which are being proposed by the European Union, the drive is towards a reduction of an overall 55% of greenhouse gases by 2030 and towards climate neutrality by 2050. The directive also aims at limiting global warming as part of the Paris Agreement to 1.5 degrees or less. It also enables consumers and businesses to make informed choices to save energy and ultimately money and increase profits. The European Green Deal at least doubles the annual energy renovation rate, and this is also part of the renovation wave strategy which has been launched. Also encourages public authority buildings, and this is something which also the government is working upon, that public buildings would be a showcase of such zero carbon buildings. It also promotes and increases smart buildings, and this is carried out utilizing, for instance, passive measures, higher indoor comfort levels, better indoor qualities, which ultimately obviously would result in less overall sickness in office spaces, so on and so forth. And it aims at achieving a high energy efficient and decarbonization building stock by 2050, as we said, and the strategy and the directive also highlights the concept of having a one-stop shop, that a particular country should have a one-stop shop for all the different services or contracting authorities, as well as contractors going to one place in order to get the service which they need. So what is a nearly zero energy building? And this is a $1 million question because there are various definitions out there. But as defined by the EPBD, which is the Energy Performance of Building Directive, the EPBD defines a nearly zero energy performance building as such, which has a very high energy performance with a low amount of energy required, covered to be significant extent by renewable sources, including energy from renewable sources produced on site or nearby. So a nearly zero energy building does not limit the potential or the possibility to opt for renewables, but it complements their utility. Also, according to ISO 52000 of 2017, it states that each member state is encouraged to abide by and gives more comprehensive approach of a nearly zero energy building to consider a multi-benchmark approach. And this is very important because NZEB looks at the overall aspects of a building. So it looks at optimizing the building envelope, the systems within it, renewables, and also the grid interaction. Currently, one of the main limitations, if I had to say so, of the EPBD is that it does not consider the embodied energy, which is the energy from the building fabric in itself, but it focuses a lot on the operational carbon. And this is exactly what we will be doing. We'll be looking at the embodied energy as well as the operational energy within the building, which we will be assessing. So how can we advance at least to net zero? There are various pillars how we can do that. Obviously, construction impacts, the impact of construction and the methodologies which we use in order to build the building plays one of the most important roles. Through potential carbon offsets, although this is not the most preferential way of doing it, it is also one of the measures which one can opt for. Through operational energy use that we, as I was saying before, we will look at the operational use of the building, and one would also be accountable to record the operational use. Through renewable energy systems and through the use of circular economy and the whole life carbon of the building itself. So one would potentially not just look at 30, 40 years span of the lifetime of the building, but also looking at using the materials and the building even after that lifetime. What are the main attributes of this and how are we linking the projects to the identification and use of certification? So basically what we're going to do is we're going to select a particular building as a case study and see how we can optimize it. But we're not just going to look at the embodied carbon and the operational carbon of the building, but we're also going to adopt certification processes. We're not going to certify the building, that's not the scope of this project, but we're going to use the different schemes and benchmark characteristics of LEED to assess the building in itself. And we will be doing so by looking at the location and transportation aspect of the building, how one can achieve and can come to the building. We're going to be looking at communal and mass transit systems. We're going to look at how sustainable the site is of this particular building, which we will be choosing. We're going to be looking at the water efficiency and the consumption within the building, at the energy and the atmosphere. So energy and atmosphere would most likely look at the energy utility of the building and also the renewables, if there are any renewable sources, or how we can improve the building if we have to adopt renewable energy sources within it. The materials and resources, so if the building is built in particular materials, how we can optimize the material of the building in order to improve the thermal transition in the building, the glazing, and the overall fabric. And also we'll be looking at the indoor environmental quality within the building. So all of these points are characteristics of LEED certification, which would be assessing the building upon. In order to give you an overview of where Malta stands now, at the moment, Malta will have two main documents, actually three, but these are the two which we use the most. The document Guide F, which was established as a draft version in 2015, and the NZIB guideline, which was established in 2015 as well. There's also the C15, which is normally used by engineers and architects as well in order to substantiate these two guidelines. So in order to give you a bit of an overview, at the moment, the overall average energy performance requirements for non-dwellings, for instance, which is the first column, is 85. But the overall average energy performance requirements for new non-dwellings is 220 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. If we had to look at where we need to go to in order to come to nearly zero, obviously it's a far cry from this, and because of this we are emphasizing the need, and I know that the government is already working on this, to reduce and amend these documents in order to be more aligned to achieving decarbonization by the set date by 2050. So the proposal, as I was saying, is as follows: that we will be carrying out a research and development initiative to collect data, and we'll be establishing sustainable benchmarks as based in comparison with the building which we're going to use, and apply it to a local scenario. And this is very important to mention, that we will not be just adopting foreign standards such as CIBSE, ASHRAE, and these standards, but we'll be adopting them in order to come up with the best possible scenario for the local scene, basically, to achieve a net zero carbon building. We will be also looking at existing regulations and legislation, but will by no means be adopting or modifying any legal policy framework. We'll just be looking at them in order to see what and how we can improve these policies, but we will not be writing the policy. That is not the scope of this exercise. In fact, as a matter of fact, the scope of this exercise is to address the overall building stock on commercial builds, and in fact the units, the main case study which we'll be using is going to be a commercial building. We'll be assessing also the legislation and policies in order to see where we're at. We'll be also establishing what a net zero carbon building should be like, based on different green certification frameworks, and we will be selecting LEED as a main framework. And we'll also be proposing sustainable financing mechanisms, potentially also green loans, in order to entice the development of a net zero carbon building. We'll also be working close to different potential stakeholders on the local markets, and the reason for this being that ultimately we want them also on board in order to ensure a successful project. There are numerous of stakeholders which we'll be looking at, and which we also have contacted already, and they seem to be on board with this overall proposal. Some concluding outputs: the report on the benchmarks and frameworks for the establishment of the net zero carbon building would be the first for Malta. We'll also be presenting an analysis report where we'll be presenting the basic existing regulations and legislations and how we can improve upon that. We will also be carrying out the modeling and issuing the results of this particular building in order to achieve and propose how these results can actually impact the policy locally. So this is the policy part, and we'll be proposing also possible aspects that could feature in sustainable financing mechanisms linked to the development of a net zero carbon building. In conclusion, our motto is as follows: working towards a transformation of the built environment to make it healthier and more sustainable. Thank you.
Fantastic, Abigail. Thank you so much for your very well presented, well thought and well prepared presentation, if I can put it that way. Very well done to you, and thank you so much for your helpful and giving us more insights into understanding why this project matters to all of us. And I'd like to invite now the President of the Malta Chamber, Marisa Schwireb, for her remarks.
Good morning all. Thank you for being with us, and a special thank you to all those who have been involved in putting this project together, because I think it is a testament to what the Chamber of Commerce, Enterprise and Industry has become today. It is the place where all those who are embracing our vision for a smart, sustainable island, for all those who believe that the targets that we are setting ourselves in terms of net zero carbon footprint by 2050, and of course, making significant progress in terms of carbon footprint by 2030, which is a prerequisite, all those who are aligned are coming together to make it happen. And the Chamber is providing the environment where we can all come together and contribute tangibly to make it happen. So here we're moving from talking about how we wish our country to be, to actually undertaking the required initiatives, required research, developing the right framework to educate the industry and to promote those standards that will ensure that we will actually get there. And I think the kind of partners that have been attracted to this project are indicative of how serious we are about our ambitions. HSBC, it's an international brand of high repute, and we are very grateful and honored that they have actually chosen to support a project like this and to make it happen through the Malta Chamber. The professionals that have come together have a strong professional reputation in this regard, and we are confident that together we can deliver something that will shape the future of this industry. And what is clear about this is that this is not just about businesses, it is also about the quality of life of our people. In Abigail's presentation, one of the things that struck me most is actually this, that this is not just about businesses, it's also about the way we live. I mean, I've never seen as many people wearing a jacket indoors in any other country as I see in autumn winter. This is a clear example that the way we build is not fit for purpose. And if we really need to upgrade our living standard, if we really want to achieve the ambitious objectives that we are signing up to, then these are the sort of initiatives that we need to take, and we need to take them with urgency, particularly with regard to buildings, because new builds will still be around in 20, 30, 40 years' time. And the large stock of buildings that are nowhere near where they need to be for us to be able to achieve our objectives need to start being seen to now. Projects like these will also help direct policy in terms of what kind of initiatives to put in place to ensure that the existing gaps are addressed. They will also help to have an informed industry. Operators in the industry will know what sort of materials to look for, what sort of designs to go for, so that their projects are future-proof. Their projects will fit into the grand scheme of the future that we see for this country. It will also help all the way down to the consumers, the people buying products for buildings, people actually buying property, to know what to look for and what to pay for, where is the value. Because what will inevitably happen is when we start talking a lot more about environmentally friendly building materials, for example, commercially, everything will start being advertised as being environmentally friendly. So we need to have a clear understanding, a clear appreciation of what kind of materials, what kind of designs actually contribute to the net zero carbon footprint buildings that we aim to have in future. And I think this is a project which is an example in one sector that we hope to see replicated in other sectors as we go along, as we move towards this transformation. It's something concrete, something measurable, something, an investment that is happening today, but it has a long-term vision. And I think this is perfectly aligned with what the Chamber has become today. So thank you all for coming together on this and for being so engaged and so committed to seeing this through so that we can be truly not just setting out the vision, but also active in its implementation. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Marisa Shwira, President of the Malta Chamber, for your remarks and how the Malta Chamber is contributing in a tangible way towards its policy, because most of the time visions and policies are just discussed, are launched, but usually we're not working hard towards achieving those goals as envisaged in the policy or vision itself. So it's really great to see this event this morning because it's one way towards achieving this goal in a tangible and concrete way. And it couldn't have been otherwise without the support of HSBC, I must say. And we're delighted to have with us this morning the CEO of HSBC Malta, Simon Vaughan Johnson. Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you. Good morning, Minister Miriam Daly, President of the Malta Chamber, Marisa Shwera, colleagues and partners. I'm really excited to be here today to participate in this launch of what is an ambitious and groundbreaking two-year project that's focused on establishing Malta's framework for a net zero carbon building. And it is all about action. I totally agree with the President's comments. But as a sustainable finance research project, the exciting thing is also this is the first for HSBC in Malta, and I understand that it's also the first such research project on this scale in Malta. HSBC is very proud to be funding this project through the HSBC Malta Foundation. And the project, as we've heard, will be led by the Malta Chamber of Commerce, Enterprise and Industry, who are actively spearheading thought leadership on sustainability in Malta in many guises. The aim of the project is to create guidelines as to what a net zero carbon building should look like in the Malta context, providing guidance on how Malta can achieve its climate goals by focusing on enhancing the green element across the building and construction industry, setting sustainability benchmarks for this sector of our economy. And why is this so important? The operation of buildings in the Malta accounts for approximately 30% of emissions, mainly attributed to heating, cooling, and electricity use. Malta's government has recently committed to carbon neutrality by 2050, and this project will therefore be contributing directly to this target. And with the support of policymakers, this project will make a holistic framework able and delivered to the market in Malta, together with guidelines that could contribute in a very material way to enabling the country to achieve its ambitious sustainability objectives. And that's the really exciting part. As a bank which is constantly investing in the success of our people and the long-term success of the communities in which we operate, we at HSBC believe that this is both a compelling and potentially far-reaching project, which we anticipate will have a very positive impact on the environment and therefore the social well-being of Malta's citizens. We very much hope that the project will help us to drive the tangible change that's needed to safeguard the environment for future generations here in Malta, and we greatly look forward to seeing the project evolve over the coming 2 years, and I'd like to wish great success to everyone working on the project. Thanks. Keith, back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Simon Vaughan Johnson, HSBC Malta CEO. Now over to Sabrine Rahman. She's the head of development of sustainability on behalf of HSBC. So, Ms. Rahman.
Thank you, Keith, and good morning, and thank you for having me here. Just to add to what the previous speakers have said, I think this is an incredibly important topic and something that needs to move at pace. And COVID has really prompted us and challenged us to really revisit some of the long-held assumptions in the way we live, in the way we work, and how we interact with each other. And it will continue to influence how we emerge, grow, and interconnect globally as we go forward. Over many centuries, but especially in the last 40 years, we've flocked to cities that provide us access to jobs, services, and amenities. and have become drivers of social mobility. But the question is, what kind of cities do we want and need once the pandemic and the global lockdown has ended? And there are options. We can allow cities to sprawl and spread out. We can build new cities, or we can make better use of the cities that we already have. Every touch point of cities are now under review, whether it be transport, healthcare, education, food security. And it really is time that collectively as a global community, we undertake sustainable urbanization, where we can optimize livability benefits for people and environmental outcomes for the planet, but also increase productivity advantages for businesses. And all of this, as mentioned before, has happened really in the backdrop of not only the pandemic, but also the European Green Deal, the European Climate Law, where for the first time in our history in the region, we are creating a framework to help achieve net zero by 2050. And I'm sure many of you have also been following the developments of the climate summit that's actually happening in Washington right now, with over 40 of our world leaders. And the message is clear: there is no time to waste, and everyone has a role to play. If we look at the most important parts of a city, which are buildings, construction accounts for about 6% of global GDP. According to the World Economic Forum. And adding to what Abigail had mentioned, where she shared some of the European statistics, but globally, buildings and construction account for 40% of carbon emissions, which is huge as a sector. Direct measures in buildings, such as energy efficiency or renewable energy, could potentially save 84 gigatons of carbon dioxide globally by 2050. Which is the equivalent of planting over 400 billion trees. So I hope this highlights just the critical role that buildings and construction as an industry will play in achieving net zero ambitions globally. And although the transition to more sustainable building practices, whether that be in design and construction or retrofitting, is possible and desirable, there are challenges that hinder broader scale adoption, because changes are required at every aspect of the building sector value chain. And there are many stakeholders, which previous speakers have touched upon, who play a part in the process, whether it's policymakers who integrate sustainable business considerations into urban planning, financial institutions such as ourselves, who can help create dedicated products to help finance green buildings, developers and owners who can help align their business strategies to design, build and operate more efficient buildings, and tenants who are the ultimate drivers of the buildings market, who can choose to opt for more sustainable living and working spaces. Last year, HSBC launched our newest sustainability strategy, which is the next iteration of our ambition and commitment to climate, in order to really maximize the impact we can have in the global economy. We believe that the transition to a low carbon and sustainable future represents one of the biggest opportunities and risks for not only the economy, but for the society. And that we, as one of the world's largest financial institutions, have an important role to play to not only help countries that we operate in to achieve prosperity, but also help manage future climate risk. We aim to lead the transition by aligning our financed emissions to net zero by 2050, but also our own operational emissions by 2030, and help and seek to help and support our customers with over $1 trillion of financing over the next 20 to 30 years to help unlock the next generation of climate solutions. But most importantly, we want to spark debate and knowledge creation, as well as sharing through the Center of Sustainable Finance, in which this report from Malta will be housed and amplified globally. We look forward to the report findings, and we offer our support from all across the world to help develop this dialogue locally and globally on this important topic. Back to you, Keith.
Fantastic, Sabrine Rahman. Thank you so much for your remarks and insights there. Managing Director, Head of Sustainability for Europe and the Middle East. Now I'd like to invite the Minister responsible for Energy, Enterprise and Sustainable Development, taking a personal interest in this particular project, and she's with us this morning, Honourable Miriam Dalli.
Thanks, Keith, and allow me to say thank you to the Chamber of Commerce and also to HSBC for this very much needed initiative. I have had the privilege of experiencing different aspects when it comes to energy efficiency. First, my previous role as a Vice Chair in the S&D group in the European Parliament, and now as Minister for Energy, Enterprise and Sustainable Development. Now, we all are aware that the European Union has identified the optimization of its building stock as one of the key priorities for the European Green Deal, and is also promoting a number of initiatives, such as the renovation wave, to ensure that its member states invest sufficiently in their building stock. And through the adoption of new directives at EU level, energy efficiency was given a priority on the agenda. Member states have signed at least 2 agreements targeting directives on energy efficiency and also the energy performance of buildings. Now, in my role as Minister, I have sought to embark on working alongside other ministries and ministers to ensure that the long-term strategies in relation to decarbonization towards 2050 and renovation strategies in the built environment are truly part of a wider and more holistic plan. Now, especially in terms of energy use and also technology optimization. If we had to look at Malta's residential sector, this constitutes 18% of the final energy consumption. But then the average consumption has shown us that it increased significantly when compared to other European countries. And on the other hand, Malta's commercial and public services sector are responsible for 24% of the final energy consumption. And as a total, then the built environment constitutes 42% of the overall final energy consumption. So we have a sector which is expanding and is bound to increase its energy consumption. Therefore, reduction in energy consumption and also the use of energy from renewable sources in the building sector constitute important measures which are very much needed to reduce the Union's energy dependency and also greenhouse gas emissions. As a result, Malta will obviously be facing increasingly stringent obligations if we are to meet our energy efficiency and also sustainability targets, both through European and also national commitment levels. So as a nation, it is important to acknowledge that the shift towards a green economy will happen, no matter what. But it is up to us to decide if we want to be at the forefront and thus reaping the benefits, or if we want to stay at the back, dragged along, but ultimately paying higher costs. Now, we acknowledge the need for the government to assist the public with the introduction of grants and also financial aid, such as those related to photovoltaic systems, to battery storage technologies, solar water heaters, roof insulation, double glazing, and also the installation of heat pumps, among others. Yet, we have to admit that schemes are almost exclusively driven by public funds, even though we are fully aware that these would not be enough unless complemented by significant private investments. So for this reason, we are working towards enabling a structure that can empower green financing in Malta. To this end, very recently, the MFSA, the Malta Financial Services Authority, approved the bylaws for the issuance of green bonds on the Malta Stock Exchange. And I believe that this is a tangible step towards our objective to ensure that green private capital flows to eligible green projects. On another note, we have, however, yet to foster a culture wherein energy efficiency becomes a feature by design. So we need to focus more on the quality of our buildings and not just the quantity. And this goes beyond the installation of low energy lighting, PV panels, and energy efficient appliances. Future dwellings need to have inbuilt characteristics such as low heat transfer building envelopes and introduction of passive measures such as maximum use of natural light, for example. Older buildings, I admit, are more challenging, yet we cannot ignore them. So government has managed to retrofit a number of public buildings to serve as a showcase for best practice opportunities for improvement. And interventions, for example, on public schools and homes for the elderly have shown that it is in fact possible to achieve nearly zero energy buildings, such as the St. Ignatius School in Siġġiewi, which was a project managed by the Energy and Water Agency. Now, in my current role as Minister for Energy and Sustainable Development, it is in my interest to ensure that both energy and sustainable development are put into good use, even when it comes to the built environment. So, in the projects and initiatives that we're launching as a ministry, we're trying also to link the Sustainable Development Goals to those initiatives and projects that we launch. So when we're speaking about this topic, there are a few of SDGs which such projects are likely to tackle. And they include, for example, SDG number 7, which focuses on affordable and clean energy, and it involves the introduction of new and more innovative technologies. SDG 8, which focuses on decent work and economic growth, which deals also with the introduction of new green jobs. SDG 9, which is about industry, innovation, and infrastructure, which also tackles the section of new innovative materials, skills, and technologies. SDG 11 focuses on sustainable cities and communities, and it directly tackles the shift towards a clean and more energy efficient habitable space. And obviously SDG 13, climate action, which tackles the greenhouse gas intensity of energy consumption, as well as the share of renewable energy. So the built environment and sustainability should be two fronts which unite people, because this impacts our social lives on a day-to-day basis. And I definitely support my colleagues in other ministries in their work on the green transition, while doing the same for the private sector and also NGOs, because ultimately I believe that everyone must do their part and we need to support one another. So I'm confident that initiatives like we have today, definitely the sector is seeking to define methods of how to establish Malta's framework for certification methods such as LEED, and this should be the way forward for further breakthroughs. Every green innovation, in my point of view, opens new doors, and it makes new policy instruments possible. But it's only by working hand in hand that the public and the private sector can unlock a greatest potential, both for the country, for the planet, but ultimately for each and every one of us. Thanks once again.
Thank you so much, Honourable Minister Miriam Dandy, for your remarks and also for outlining the government's vision in this regard, and also the current initiatives being taken by the government, more particularly in sustainable development, which you're personally responsible for. I do have a question from one of the attendees, because we do have some 33 attendees at the moment, so feel free to ask any questions now, both to our panelists, but possibly more technical questions to Engineer Abigail Kutaya. She's with us, so feel free to ask any questions whatsoever, or possibly share your views. So I do have a question here. With the European Green Deal on the horizon, do you think this framework will pave the way for Malta to connect with it more effectively? So, Abigail.
Thanks, Keith, for the question. Yes, it's a very valid question, actually. In fact, as has been, I identified this also, and the even Honourable Minister has also mentioned this. The European Green Deal has recently launched the Renovation Wave strategy, basically, which focuses specifically on the importance of green builds and the importance of renovating our building stock. In fact, there is approximately the European Green Deal focus, and even the Renovation Wave focus, that it will be renovating around 35 million of worth of money in terms of 35 million worth of building stock, which will be renovated along the years in order to ensure that we move to decarbonization or climate neutrality by 2050. So yes, this was in line with that. It also, the renovation wave also highlights the importance of creating green jobs, and by carrying out the identification of a net zero carbon building would, as a result, create green and more sustainable jobs, because obviously there's going to be a need in order to identify new skill sets at different blue collar and even white collar hierarchies as well. It also, the renovation strategy also focuses on energy efficiency and energy use, which we're going to be primarily focusing on, and will be also focusing on the embodied carbon, which I spoke to about, and the renovation strategy in line with the Green Deal also focuses on this. So yes, we'll definitely be in line with the adoption of the European Green Deal.
Thank you so much, Abigail, for your remarks and for your brilliant explanation there. I do have another question from Bernie now. Can this wonderful project also think about how it will communicate its findings, framework, guidelines to all stakeholders to optimize on quick uptake and impact? I guess personally, this is a very valuable question. I don't know if you can answer that, Abigail.
Yes, definitely. I would also give a framework of how it's going to happen, but then if someone from the chamber would want to also share their views, it's also very important. So basically what we're going to do, as from the next coming weeks, we'll be focusing on first going to the stakeholders in order to gather the information. Then we'll carry out the modeling and all the necessary technical evaluation, which would then be reported. We'll be having also a dissemination and also a form of official launch also by the Chamber and the HSBC, where we'll be sharing this information with the general public, and also in line with that, we'll also be discussing with the stakeholders as we go along. So eventually what we're after, and I believe what also the Chamber is after, is getting these results into the fruition of these results into the actual implementation. So yes, we will be sharing the results, but then I would leave it up to the Malta Chamber in order to explain exactly how we'll be doing this as we go along, obviously.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Abigail. If you want to ask any questions in person, feel free to do so. I'll just urge you.
I'll quickly interject, Keith, sorry, that
Sure.
we've got a number of workshops planned at the end of the project, very much like this one. And I will invite the president to give her views on this as well.
Yes, I think the main reason why we are involved in this project is actually this, to enable the dissemination and uptake of all the know-how that comes out of a project like this. So we have a number of horizontal thematics within our structures that are working on topics such as energy efficiency, sustainable mobility, building and construction, and these circular economy as well. These kind of horizontal thematics have access to key players in the industry. And it will be through these horizontal thematics, plus through specific activities to promote the findings of this project, that we will take the leading role then in disseminating this information, and also in incorporating what comes out of this project into our future policy documentation, which then is taken up by all those entities that are involved in the process of designing policy and standards. So it's a whole chain. The project is a 2-year project, but I'm sure that the output of it will be used for many years to come and will form part of those building blocks that educate our communication, our education in the industry, and also the publication of documents that are relevant to these industries.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Marisa. I'm noticing we also have with us as one of our attendees, Ryan Kallouz. If not mistaken, he's the opposition spokesperson for energy. So Ryan, I don't know if you have any questions or you want to share your views on this project. So kindly, okay, and possibly you can switch on your camera if possible as well.
Let me facilitate.
So in the meantime, we do have another question. Will the case study be looking at the environmental impact and carbon footprint of buildings during the construction phase? Possibly you can answer this question because it's possibly a question addressed to you, Abigail, so soon after. Okay, so.
Yes, sure.
So I don't know,
Sure.
Ryan, if he wants to share his views personally or he wants to ask a question or. Ryan, are you? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. I would like to congratulate the Malta Chamber for this proactive initiative in tackling this subject, and also thank HSBC for funding this project. It is good to see a constituted body such as the Malta Chamber taking an active role, in particular because the efforts required by Malta to achieve a status which would be commensurate with levels which have already been achieved by other EU member states requires an input from the vast constituted bodies and civil society and the population at large. I would like to share very briefly two of our pillars which we had included in our energy strategy launched last February, entitled A New Energy Future for Malta 2021, 2030, 2050. I've had the pleasure to give a presentation on our strategy to the previous president of the chamber, David Chwiret. In fact, we had been provided with some other good points which we would be including in our strategy, but we need to keep in mind the departing points. Today's departing point, with respect to our country, is the existing National Energy and Climate Plan, which had been submitted by Malta in 2019, with the European Commission giving its feedback in late 2020, describing it as unambitious when it comes to renewables and of a very low ambition when it comes to energy efficiency. When it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, its reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, the European Commission stated that Malta's plan lacks tangible actions. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done by all parties involved, there's no doubt, but pillar 2 of our strategy targets, namely energy efficiency. We recognize the fact that we need a culture change. This has been stated already. And where changes in cultures are required, we need to implement that also with education. So I believe starting at the very early stages, we need to continue to educate people to make them aware that it pays much more in the longer term to invest slightly more in, for example, purchasing a heat pump rather than the typical cheaper electric water heater. And in our strategy, we have proposed an increase in the financial assistance given to such schemes. And I am happy to see that Minister Dalli, my counterpart, has in fact increased this subsistence over the past few days. Another issue which we've also tackled, and which also in our view impinges on the zero energy building concept, is the issue of solar rights. We all know Malta's perhaps disadvantage is its limited space. From one side, we cannot limit individuals to actually limit their right to enjoy and fully develop their property, whilst on the other hand, we also need to ensure that they have access to solar rights. This need not be only limited to having your solar panels installed on your roof. But there are other ways how we can bypass this existing problem to provide a way how we can widen the possibilities of people accessing solar rights in instances where their roof is in shade, where they have...
Ryan, if I may ask you to conclude, because we're running out of time.
Yes, I will conclude. So my concluding point is that energy efficiency is very important, because not only because it gives us more sustainable utility bills, but another two more important factors are the point that it will better our environment, because it will reduce emissions. But more importantly, and I will conclude with my last remark by taking a point from the President's comment. She stated she has never seen so many Maltese. She has never seen people dressing so much inside their homes as she has seen in Malta. And that is the reality that we face. In spite that we are a country in the Mediterranean, we evidently do not have the ideal building conditions, and this is our challenge ahead, and we are very committed to addressing this in the coming future. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ryan Carlos, opposition spokesperson there for energy and water. We do have several questions. I'm surprised with the amount of questions we're receiving from some of our attendees. One of the questions is related to, will the case study be looking at the environmental impact and carbon footprint of buildings during the construction phase? So Abigail, I've already mentioned this question. I don't know if you can briefly answer it.
Good. So basically, there were two questions. What we'll be looking at, just in order to put everything into perspective, we will be looking, yes, at the impact of the carbon footprint. That's why I said we'll be looking at the embodied carbon and the impacts of CO2 emissions. We'll be using specific softwares in line with the evaluation of the life cycle assessment of the building. And we'll also be utilizing existing national frameworks such as the NECP, the National Environmental and Climate Plan, for the adoption of such strategies, because obviously there are already good strategies out there which have been established in the past years. For instance, the NECP was established in 2019, and now there's also the LCD as a low carbon development strategy, and the LTRS, which are coming out in the next coming months, and we'll be using these already established strategies in line with the EU directives in order to assist us in issuing the definition and establishment of the net zero or nearly zero carbon development building.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Abigail. We do have some other questions, but regrettably, we're running out of time. So for any other questions you may have, feel free to just send your questions to Timothy Alden, and then you might refer them to Abigail. So his email address is timothy.alden@maltachamber.org.mt. So with that, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being with us this morning, especially HSBC for supporting this project, which we're launching formally today. To all those involved, especially Glenn, Matthew, Timothy, Abigail, and also our former president, David Chwirep, and all the stakeholders involved. Hopefully we'll have another event, similar event, with the concrete results coming out from the research undertaken by engineer Abigail Kutaya. Wish you a fantastic day and a very nice weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.